Hello, future millionaires, and welcome back to the Get Rich Slow podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Robert Delavan.
Good afternoon. How is everybody?
Howdy. And this is Adrian Schermer. Today, we're going to dive right into it and talk about an important topic of how to price your home for sale. And Rob, obviously, you are the lead here for knowledge. I probably only know enough to get myself in trouble. So let me be the idiot here. Let me ask you the stupid questions that may be boiling in people's brains. And let's find out, how do we homes are very different than other things. There's some overlap with other items that you might sell, right? But real estate especially is almost always the most expensive thing that any person will buy in their lifetime.
Right.
So pricing correctly and tapping into the psychology of your buyers is a huge part of picking the right place to intro at. And we see people use all different kinds of strategies right out in the market. Some of them seem very clever and they actually just shoot you in the foot. And then other ones seem kind of ham-fisted, but they're actually, I guess, a more honest approach. But Rob, why don't you give me a layman's intro to how me, as someone who might be coming to you to sell a house, is going to get this done?
So basically where I want to start is the concept of we're in a seller's market right now. Now, I'm talking about my expertise is coming from the Portland metro area. So let's get these disclaimers out of the way, right? Different markets are different in different parts of the country, but across the country, the general statistics are there's a whole lot more buyers than there are sellers. We've talked about that before. We'll continue to talk about it as things change. The main driver in this buyer or this seller's market, is the fact that interest rates are so much lower. So therefore monthly payments are so much lower and easier to manage for the same price of home. So
yeah. And I will make a pit stop here. I think we should do a quick aside to talk about, while, for example, Portland's a hot market. If you have a home that could be financed with conventional financing, it's a great family home. You know, if you're right in that target market for people with 2.5 nuclear family children, you know, the whole 9 yards, you are easier to sell than the guy who has a log cabin in the middle of the city, right? I mean, we're talking, we're going to be using some averages here, but this is something that the whole country is experiencing right now, as an inventory shortage. It's just really compounded for us, so we can be a great example of how the extremes of this system work.
So I'm going to talk about a specific property that I listed. I won't use addresses or that sort of thing today, but it's in a suburb of Portland. It's in a subdivision. There's hundreds of similar homes around it. Very easy to comp out. And one of the assumptions that I'm going to make for the purpose of brevity and just keeping things easy to digest and understand is that there's an appraised value here. And we were able to zero in on appraised value, is what it's actually worth to a bank. And the appraised value in this scenario was, and this home was 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,300 square feet. Very typical of what you'd find in a Portland suburb, built in the last 20 years, very nicely finished. A few things maybe you would do to it to upgrade over time, but it's not completely out of date. And frankly, it's move-in ready. So with all of these...
When you're saying appraised value, though, what does that mean?
So appraised
in this
value
context?
is, I'm going to try to use as many, I'm not an appraiser, not a licensed appraiser. I can't say that the bank would appraise it for exactly X, but I can say an appraised value or a market value is based on past sales, and trying to use as many of the rules that appraisers use, such as staying a mile or less for comparable properties.
I mean, let's take a second to talk about that too, right? That is what an appraisal is, guys. We're talking about a financial appraisal. When an appraiser comes out to your house, they are trying, I'd go a step further, actually, Rob. My experience, 6 months, ideally even 3 months if they can. They want the freshest sales in your locality. Distance is a little more weighted, you know, but the goal is to find 6 properties that are pretty damn close to what you're trying to find a value for.
1 mile or less is the general rule. If they have to
go over a mile, they usually have to explain why they had to, and why it's still relevant, because a mile is a huge distance in real estate, right? I mean, we're talking
it's a whole lot of
hundreds,
blocks,
maybe thousands of buildings between one spot and another by a mile.
Right. So a mile or less, ideally like a tenth of a mile, in a subdivision, you can do that, the one block over, or, a quarter, whatever it is. And then obviously they want the sales, they can go back 6 months.
Yep.
Technically they can go back a year. If they go back any farther or differ from that, they also have to explain why they did. There wasn't any other comps, that sort of thing.
Right. The explanation usually is literally options 1 through 5 were only the ones that sold, that actually fit the bill here. I added 6, and also I'm going to barely even give 6 any attention. It's going to have much less weight in this comparison.
Right. So at the end of the day, they're coming at as close as possible with closed sales that are as similar as possible, and with same features, generally speaking, same age.
I'll slay some myths too while we're in this corner. Sure. They can adjust for foreclosure. They understand that there's a foreclosure, a bank short sale. There is a myth that exists. That the house foreclosed across the street and my property value dropped. No, it did not. Not in any real way. There's at this point in the industry, the data is there. Everybody knows when it's a foreclosure, and no one would practically say, well, that foreclosure sold for this much.
Right.
All the copper pipes missing and the windows are blown out, but we think your house is worth the same. That's just not how, that's not a risk that you stand out there.
And
short
the general
of major
rule
foreclosures,
of
like an entire city.
The general rule of thumb in our market is foreclosures are going to sell somewhere between 80 and 90% of market value, typically, based on the fact that their condition is poor and you have to deal with banks and whatever else. It's not as straightforward of a transaction. So making an assumption that this particular home that we listed recently, and this was just in the last few weeks, we felt that we were valuing the property as close as possible as an appraiser would, for around 620. It was basically between 615 and 625.
And I tell my clients this a lot.
What's that?
You guys are the best valuation outside of an actual appraisal, which you pay, north of $600, $700, $800, $1,000 for, depending on property. When I have a client call me and say, hey, I want to refinance, I'm not quite sure what my house is worth. This is what some website online says that it's worth. I go, that's really cool. But especially if there's not a bunch of recently sold homes around you, that website is an aggregated data robot that cannot estimate. Call your realtor before you go and spend $1,000 or $600 or whatever it is on an appraisal, and then find out that your house wasn't really worth that much and you can't do the terms that you wanted to anymore.
Right. And that's
an equity check.
Exactly. And we do that all day long for clients, for past clients, for potential future clients. We're sending out these opinions of value, or a CMA, comparative market analysis. In this instance, we zeroed in on 620. And the question on this episode is, how would we price and what strategy would we use? And of course, we're taking, on our side, we sell, give or take 80 homes or so a year. So within my group, so we're pretty much, we're doing enough volume that we know. And I would say that, we're the experts in the area on that. There's other.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, how many CMAs are you doing behind the scenes though? Because we're in a market where people are doing, maybe a dozen offers is not that uncommon. So you guys are evaluating on a weekly basis.
We're doing double digits a week, so there's a lot of CMAs that are going out. We're pricing these properties all the time. So we're steeped in this.
And it's fun. In a future episode, we're going to bring up the data for a property. Maybe we can use mine as an example, Rob. I'll throw myself on the gauntlet here. And we'll do some, it'll be more visual. This will be something that would be worth hitting up to YouTube to see how this process is actually done in the background.
That'll be fun to do. I always, when clients come into my office here, oftentimes they start asking me about their home, and I'll be like, well, let's figure it out. And we'll literally go through it in 5 or 10 minutes about, just the pros and cons of the home, the condition, different things. And then, okay, what's your competition? What sold recently? And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty straightforward. So
I love it. You're always so casual about it too. You're like, and that's this percent factor. And I'm just like, what? Well, hold on. Let me take some notes here. And then it's different for every market too. So you couldn't just ship Rob over to Chicago and then go, hey, what's this garage worth? I don't know.
Right.
What's a garage worth in Chicago? It's something different than it is in Portland. Something way different than it is in the middle of the desert somewhere, where there's land aplenty. So
it's funny you asked that question.
You need local knowledge.
For new builders, just to answer it, a little nugget here for our listening audience pleasure. Typically every garage bay, especially a third garage bay in a home in the Portland metro area, is worth about $20,000 to $30,000. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you got to have the footprint to cover it and all that sort of thing. So
sure. That's why you'll see a lot of new development being garage, house. That's why mine's this way, right?
Exactly.
That's the maximum bang for buck dollar use per for land.
Yep. Put the house on top and garage on the bottom.
Yeah.
So in this instance, we went to the client came to us. Hey, we want you guys to help me sell the house. And we were actually in the process of already helping them buy another home. And they said, hey, what's it worth? What do you think we should do? And we'd gone through this whole process with them on the buy side, which was tough. And we know it's a seller's market. We want to make sure that we sell it quickly. They wanted to sell in one weekend rather than price at the top and let it sit for a few weeks, dealing with showings, and they have family and kids and just being displaced for getting the house ready, show ready, all of those things.
Yeah.
So with all of that said, and it's oversimplifying, but we want to try to do this in 15 minutes or less. We jump in and we say, okay, we think it'll appraise at 620. That's the target value. Obviously, we want to position ourselves, strategize in such a way that we're pricing the home and making sure that it's in condition that will drive that price up. And in this market, I think through negotiation, being strategic, and frankly leveraging on my team's education, training, and experience, we can get somewhere around 3% above market. Which is not uncommon. Now I could charge, we could list the house, right at 620.
Yeah.
And, 3% above that would be, roughly 640, right? Mm-hmm. And we'd be in a situation where, we got 3% over, but how long would that take? Would we be able to pick offers? Different things like that. So what we decided to do, just to take you through it, and just interrupt me and ask me why questions, Adrian, because I'm going to rip through. So we listed it at $599.9 rather than at appraisal value.
Curious.
Then we got multiple offers. We ended up with 5 or 6, I want to say, over the first weekend. We sent the client to the coast. They went to the Oregon coast for the weekend, or actually they might've been out of town at a wedding or, something like that. Mm-hmm. So they got out of the house. We did wide open showings, nonstop. We had over, actually not quite 20 showings, but we were close. And, by Monday, we went live on a Thursday, and by Monday we had, 5 or 6 offers in hand. Actually it was 5. And we then proceeded on Monday to go through the process of working with those offers to see if they would improve against each other. And we ended up at 641,000 in one weekend.
Suspiciously close to what you said. Interesting.
Right.
Rob, why did you start at such a low number? Why not just start at 640?
Okay. So we could have started at 640 or 625 or frankly 650. If we did that, given the heat of the market, it may or may not have gotten into contract. The house was very turnkey, but it would have most likely only appraised for around 620, 625. Well, if I have one offer and it's for 641 and the appraisal comes in at 620, then this is after inspections. This is after we've gone through almost a close. Appraisal comes in at 620. Now the buyer can walk away because the appraisal came in low. And that's how standard transactions in the state of Oregon and most other states are put together, in that if it appraises low, there's what's called an appraisal contingency or financing contingency, which appraisal is part of that. And everybody can renegotiate at that point. So we're at 641 and it appraises at 620. We do our darndest to negotiate back and forth, but basically our house isn't worth what our buyer is saying it's worth. And we end up conceding down to maybe 625 or 630.
Yeah.
But if I have 5 offers and they're all competing against each other, every single 4 of the 5, let me double check here. Yes, 4 of the 5 all put in that they would do a concession for an appraisal shortfall.
Yep.
So if it appraised for 10K or 15K or 20K less, they would make up that difference in down payment.
Yep.
So
now this deserves repeating. If this house, if I offer to buy this house at 640 and I am offering a $10,000 appraisal shortfall contingency,
right,
but it appraises at 620, let's add another layer to the onion.
yes.
That means that, yes, we are more than my 10,000 over, but now it's up to me and the seller to negotiate that 10,000. I've already put 10,000 over appraised value on the table. I already said I was in for that. So I may just take it at 630, and that seems like pretty agreeable if everybody's on board. I said I was going to buy for 10 over appraisal. Or we might end up somewhere in the middle, like 635, because yeah, it is a hot market and you may be paying for next year's price because you really want that home.
And you better believe that we're going to negotiate that $10,000 difference, whatever it is. But if there was no appraisal premium, now we're probably, let's say we do meet in the middle, so to speak, which is not always, something that I would assume. I would actually say that meeting in the middle for our clients is kind of a cop out. We want to do better than that.
Sure. And there's room to be made up after this conversation too, right?
Exactly. So, we go from 640, it appraises for 620, and with no appraisal premium, now we got to negotiate. Well, what if that buyer, and it's only one buyer, what if they don't have any extra cash to bring down?
Yeah.
They basically say, sorry guys, we can only do 620. Otherwise we have to walk, because this is, they've leveraged every dollar they possibly can just to get the down payment together and closing costs and everything else. So now I'm beholden to that, and my seller is going to get a worse deal, a worse net to them than they would have otherwise. Now, the flip side of that is I go in at 600 and I get all those frustrated buyers who could go up to 650, but they've missed out multiple times.
Yeah.
And they know that this house is only going to appraise for 620 because their brokers hopefully are smart and savvy and know the neighborhood. And they're going to tell their client, yes, this will probably appraise for 5, 10, 15, maybe 20,000 less if we end up at 640, because they think they're looking at the exact same comps as we are. And they're saying it'll probably appraise out at about 620. Yeah. Well, with that said, if I have 4 or 5 people competition, and this is the key, 4 or 5 different offers, competition 2 or more generally means 3% over appraised value.
Yeah.
Is the actual market value now. Yeah. So if there's competition versus not. So 3%.
All other factors withstanding, right? Exactly. I mean, we also have a factor here where I just want to get aside for this because I keep hearing people balk at the idea of like 100,000 over listing, which, is often partially because a home is underlisted to bring up attention, even though technically that's a violation of the Oregon administrative rule for real estate. It's just common enough, and it's hard to catch someone doing that unless they're doing it to an observed degree. But value is a tricky thing, right? To truly determine value is, we're already talking about how we do it in as scientific and as unbiased a way as possible. But at the end of the day, if you've got the corner lot, if you got the mayor's house, if you've got the one house on the block that in the wintertime you've got a view through a set of trees that loses their leaves. These are things that don't have value on an appraisal. You cannot compare them because you're the only house in the neighborhood that has this unique feature, or I gotta get my kid in this school district. Understand that there are buyers out there that are motivated by things that are outside of the way that we can evaluate a home's value. And even though school district is a good one, school district can literally drive values. Your homes in an area could be worth $10,000 more each because the school is so good, which is why that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But it's a matter of desire and the knowledge that these things will eventually be worth that much money. It sounds so weird sometimes to say it doesn't matter what you pay for a house, but there are lots of reasons why it doesn't within reason. And especially if it's going to be your forever home, I don't care.
Yeah.
If I have the money to do that,
Right.
obviously I'd like to pay less, but I care more. I don't
Right.
not care. I care more about that being my house that I get to stay forever. And there's a huge emotional and psychological component at work here,
Right.
especially as you get into houses that aren't just sort of like the other house that's one or two
Right.
homes down. I can just wait for another house to go for sale in this general area versus this is spectacular. This is the only mega
Right.
lot in the area.
And that's the piece where so where we're pricing. So we decided at to be at 600, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you alluded to this. We did not price it at 550. I don't need 20 offers to negotiate against each other. I don't need to waste people's time. I'm not here trying to torture them,
It's a
right?
terrible strategy.
It's
I see it
just,
all the time, though.
that's ridiculous.
If someone tells me they've got 30, 40 offers, I almost sometimes feel like, I don't know if that's brag. You're saying that like it's a good thing. And I don't know that it is. I think that means you've done something wrong. There shouldn't be that many people interested in the same property that rapidly, unless you've underpriced it, right? I mean, how else do you generate that level of entertainment?
Well, and that's the piece. And that is a decent strategy for certain properties that would otherwise be a struggle. Let's say a property that's on a busy road, backs to a freeway or something like that.
The fixer-uppers, I see that a lot with the fixer-uppers, right? Where they're kind of just like, this is the open bid.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like an auction, and there is an element to the auction of what we did here too, but it was basically being very open and transparent. And I won't, bore the audience completely with all of the conversations we had with those 5 offers, but it was basically being very transparent and leveraging them against each other in a respectful way. They'll know exactly what,
being upfront with your expectations.
And we actually take that one step further, just as a company, with myself as the head. I actually generally disclose what numbers we expect it to be in, and where we're at and what they're going to have to do to beat it. And other brokers really appreciate that, because the old school way of basically having a closed bid envelope system or a closed bid auction, which is in essence saying, hey, bring us your best.
Yeah.
You don't know where you need to be. What we're trying to avoid is that buyer who got second place, who said, oh man, it went for 10K over what we offered. And I would have paid that 11 all day long.
My heart breaks a little every time I hear that phrase.
It happens all the time. And if we just had more,
I would have paid more. Well, they would have paid more. That's usually the response.
Maybe that's the case.
Maybe that's the thing. Yeah.
But people will eventually self-select out and just say, oh man, I can't go over that 640. And then I got the guy that's saying 641, and okay, there's the winner, but what are the terms? So one of the other pieces I wanted to make sure is our general goal is to be within 5% of the final sales price, just so that we're not wasting people's time, unless it was a total dump that we're trying to run just as a total pure auction, but that's a different scenario. Yeah. This was a move-in ready, very nice, staged, beautiful home ready to go at the top of its particular price point in the market. So the question becomes is, why didn't I list it at 615, which was kind of the bottom end of what it would have been priced at as an appraisal value? And why didn't I list it at 630, hoping that somebody's going to come in and, we'll get that 625 person. Well, the reason is very simple. So, and I'm going to actually turn this question around to you. When people ask you to get pre-approved, generally speaking, are you approving them for 605, or are you approving them for 625, for 650, 675, 7, so on?
I'm approving them for a payment, really, if I'm honest with you. Exactly. I mean, that's the kind of flip of it. But yeah, generally there's a soft range. The lazy way to do it is to just cut a little off the top so that you don't have to deal with the difficult underwriting as the loan officer, and then go, you're only approved for 550, instead of going, these are actually feasible if it's got the right tax, the right insurance, all that stuff. So I don't mean to answer that question with a question, but yeah, you're right. I mean, usually it's a bigger, rounder number that we're loading up to in that process.
We call that the quartile, right? And 90+% of all searches are at 600. And they're not looking, if their cap is 600, they are not looking at that house that's 601.
Yeah, especially not in that price bucket. I call it red line clients. What's the most I can afford?
Right.
Ooh, that's a loaded question, bud. Let's talk about how much it costs to own a house. Most of that happens in, I would say, quartile is a great way to put it. The
Right.
lower quartile, or maybe even lower 15% of purchase price that I see.
Right. So what happens is, so we're trying to build out, okay, a buyer profile here. And the buyer that pays the most has missed out on 2 or 3 homes. Okay, already. So they're frustrated. This is the human element, right? And they could afford 650, that payment of 3,500 a month, right? Including taxes and insurance and all that sort of thing. But they really want to stay under 3,000.
Right.
So they're at 600,000 is as high as they want to go as a typical just general rule. Well, if we were at 601, that 600,000 capped buyer isn't going to see this house.
Right.
But we know that there's a frustrated buyer out there that's going to reach out to their Adrian, right? And is going to say, oh man, we've missed out 2 or 3 times.
Check out this address.
No, this house, and here's the taxes and all this sort of thing, is going to go for, around 620, 630. That's the appraised, but we think it might be 630, 640. What do you think? And you're saying, well, it's a stretch to go to 650, but you could do it.
Yeah.
So now they're coming back and they're being aggressive because at the end of the day, they can afford $3,300 a month. And that's just their thing. They can do it.
Yeah.
They maybe don't want to, but they want.
Most people stretch, property. If I'm honest. Most people realize that there is room there too.
Right. And so the psychology is if I was at 615 or 620, people at 600 aren't going to see it.
Right.
And it's not going to necessarily, like in this particular case, 625 would have been where we would have put it like at a middle of the road list price. And a very aggressive low end was 600. And then a very let's see, hope and a prayer would be 650. And what would happen is at 626, anybody under 625 is probably not going to look at it, even if they could afford it, because most people could afford slightly over. So,
or they're expecting this, because this is not non-normative, right? Like if you see a house at 599, you can be pretty sure you're not going to offer 599 and buy that house. Right. When you talk about someone with that even short-term experience, I've made an offer or two, any agent worth their salt who's representing those person is going to be like, by the way, right now stuff's a little crazy and these are the expectations. Right. If I go buy a new car off the lot when it's just arrived off the showroom, it's a new model, you're probably going to pay MSRP. You're not going to get a discount on the hot new shiny item. You're not going to get the latest iPhone on sale. The same concepts here. We have a demand-driven market. Expectations are set that people are paying a little bit more than what that initial price is.
Right.
The bid is assumed.
Right. So the last piece that I'll leave you guys with is this concept of you want to be the best price and product as a home for sale in your category, right? And we've already defined our categories as 600, 625, 650, and so on.
We got these buckets.
And in that neighborhood, right? So we want to be the best house, absolute best house versus the competition. So if we were to list it at 640 or 650, right? We would have been, okay. It was an average home, out of 10, it would have been, number 5 or 6 because it was in great shape, but not 1 or 2 versus at 600 for sure. It was the best house by far versus the houses that are at 580, 590. This home was way better just as a feel. Like you walk in, you're just like, oh my gosh, this could, this is incredible. The other 10 homes that I just saw don't even compare.
Yeah.
Versus that same home at 640, you're competing against 650 homes and it's not the best house. It's maybe number 4 or number 5, whatever it is. So the idea is price at a point, and we were aggressive. We were at 6. We probably could have gotten somewhat similar results at 625, but probably, or 624.9, but probably not quite as good with the appraisal premiums. So what we ended up with was a $20K appraisal premium, which was awesome, and 2 competing offers, and they ended up right at 640 and 641.
Yeah.
And everybody else was driving up to like 630, 635. And then the final number of 2 were right at 640, 641. We ended up at 641. And with the appraisal premiums, with a short inspection time and a quick close.
How many of the offers had appraisal premiums?
I want to say 4 out of the 5.
Okay.
So everybody knew. The fifth
people
one
understood
kind of
what's going on.
It was a, let's say maybe an immature agent, didn't really know what was going on. And
yeah,
frankly,
we can take an aside for the unrepresented too, by the way. This is why it's so hard to be unrepresented. I don't want to, it's tough because I don't want to necessarily steer people for, away from, it is a bit of a personal choice, but I don't believe in it. And I see people do it all the time. And this is like one of the first layers of that is just this concept of like it's not fair to you.
Sure. Well,
people who have done this already for years are still really chewing on these concepts we're talking about. Right. And we'll continue to touch on this a bit as we move forward. But I'm glad that we spent one episode here doing this because there is a lot. This is great data for anyone who wants to understand why homes are worth what they're worth or how pricing works. This sounds like something like we're talking about $500,000 homes, which in a lot of places is a luxury property. Guys, this is in Portland. You have to understand relative to the bar, this is an average home. And for that reason, and for lots of other ones, this applies to your town where there's a $300,000 home average. We're talking about your $300,000 home. This is not that different from that. As long as there's demand, 3% it's not that much,
right?
Relative to the full size of the house, right? If we flip the demand curve and there were sellers, hoping someone makes an offer, would we be, what kind of percentage could we expect then for under expected value?
If there's no competition, our market is currently selling for right at about 100% of list price on average. Versus if there's competition, it's generally selling for about 103%. So that's kind of the numbers that varies.
So spread's not insane
and that sort of thing. But here's the thing: at the end of the day, if you do this process right and you allow us to run our proven system of pricing and negotiating accordingly. At the end of the day, $40,000 premium, which really was more like a $20,000 premium, ended up being, so it wasn't a 6% premium. It was really more like a 3% premium, but 641 versus 600,
it's huge.
Or 620 versus 640. That's that value that if we're allowed to run with it, leveraging, everything that we bring and our expertise, we can drive it up. And the sad thing is that client that got of that green agent, buyer's agent. They'll never really know. Because the system,
it's not them, it's their representation, probably.
Exactly.
A huge portion of it.
But that buyer,
but there's not a feedback loop for that.
No, there isn't. And that buyer never will really know that they were never in the running for that home ever.
It's really one of the most fascinating things
really
about this whole industry.
Thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because and I know some bridge burner agents that, I'll hear about offers coming in and people are like, I don't know, I don't want to work with this person. And they can't tell the seller, don't take this offer because of that. But it takes the tiniest drop of doubt in your water, to go, this doesn't taste right. I'm good.
So here's the thing.
Especially with competition like this, right?
I will disagree with you, Adrian, because there are agents in the Portland metro area that when they come across, we will say, hey, if it's to your benefit, the client, obviously we'll work with them. We'll work with whoever to the benefit of our client. We have legal fiducial responsibility. But what we will tell them is, based on my experience dealing with them in the past on this one, and this one, this one, everything else being the same or regular, I will say, let's pick this agent over this agent because this one has a great reputation. And this one, frankly, they'll, cut off their nose to spite their face, or they've been unethical in the past, or they have a terrible reputation, different things like that. And frankly, if I have history there, I don't see anything wrong. In fact, I think I'm legally, fiducially obligated to provide that information.
You're not crap talking if you provide real personal firsthand experiences.
Exactly.
And it doesn't take long to figure out who's doing a great job and who's, maybe just like a reputation for being difficult just to be difficult, or, doesn't represent their own clients' interests very well. Those are bad things for everybody who's involved.
They are. So anyway, so let's just wrap this up with, pricing, it's not an exact science, but you want to be aggressive with your price, considering the product. You want to know your homework as far as what it's going to appraise for, or have done your homework. You want to know exactly what your competition is going to be based on your price point. And then you also want to know what the trending of the market is and how it's likely to affect. The last piece that I'll just leave you with is there are times, especially as markets change or seasons change, that sort of thing, you have to be willing to pivot. Because at the end of the day, and I say this all the time, I'm never so arrogant as an individual listing agent for an individual property to say that my home makes the market or drives the market.
Yeah.
We have to react to the market. We are one small sliver of the market. But I'm never so arrogant as to say we drive it. The market drives us and we need to be reactive to it. So
yep.
I'll
you gotta make the best of that situation. Absolutely.
Hopefully there's enough to crunch on here.
Thanks for joining our attempt at brevity. Yes. We'll catch you next time on the Get Rich Slow podcast. Good luck out there, future millionaires.
Awesome. Thank you.